Hello and welcome to Dialogue. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the founding of China's Xizang autonomous region, what most people have known as Tibet. Chinese President Xi Jinping pays a visit to the region to attend activities marking the anniversary. What are some of the highlights of the visit? What developments have been made in the region over the past 6 decades? And why do Western media narratives continue to show a deep misunderstanding of the region? To help us answer these questions and more in the first part of the program, I'm glad to be joined by Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics, and also Professor Roland Boer from the School of Philosophy at Renmin University of China. In the second part, I'll also be joined by Andy Boreham, the columnist and filmmaker at Shanghai Daily. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue. Baocheng, I will start with you. We are, of course, marking the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the Xizang autonomous region. For those who are not familiar with Tibet, with this region, share with us some of the background, like what's it like 60 years ago?
Well, institutionally, 60 years ago, out of the serfdom, where the priests and the tribal leaders were really playing a very extractive practices against the common people. And it seems that they have a very strong religion, but people were not informed because 95% of the people were illiterate, and the over 90% people never traveled, around the radius of 5 miles. So therefore, they could easily be extracted, and there were a lot of practices of cruelty, even to skin people for some religious practices, etc. So that's the institutional setting, and now it's really a liberation where people are getting more educated. Now you see that almost everybody in Tibet or Xizang is literate, and also there was no school before. Now they have 7 universities over there, and now the life expectancy, not to mention it, so the from less than 40 years old now to 72, and even going higher. So these are really in conformity with the measurement developed by UNDP with regard to 3 dimensions to measure people's improvement. One is life expectancy, the other is the educational level, and third is the living standard. So by every dimension set forth internationally, they are really making remarkable, massive transformation over the years.
We will take a closer look at those standards, Baocheng. Roland, given what Baocheng has said in the past, of course, this is a roof of the world. This elevation sickness, for example, for a lot of people, if you are your first time to be there. I mean, what about the challenges in the past, for this region to develop? Or lack of infrastructure, I would imagine, and also illiteracy, high rate of illiteracy, etc.
I think, well, maybe I'll give an example. I was when I was there 2 years ago, and I'm hoping to go again next month. We were visiting the famous Patala Palace in Lhasa, and I was talking with a young woman from Xizang about that. And I said, "Have you've been here many times?" She said, "Yes, I have." And it's a magnificent structure and so on. It was built, back in the 640s, 650s. But then I said, look, I'm actually looking forward to visiting the Museum for the Liberation of the Serfs, which is just across from the Patala Palace. And she said to me, yes, I like that place better because that's my family's history. We were enserfed and we had no freedom. We had to work for somebody else. And now, of course, she works in Beijing during semester at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and regularly goes back to see family and friends. And that little encounter indicated the massive, massive difference, the changes in the economic, social and political structures, which have led to the situation now in Xizang. The second example was that I noticed when we were traveling around that these high tension electricity transmission towers, they were quite literally going up, as you looked out, going up the very, very steep slopes of the mountains. And that I was amazed at the way in which they'd been constructed on the sides of these mountains and right through. And I found out later that the whole of Xizang now has been connected with an electricity grid. And this is an extraordinary achievement for some of the remotest, highest, and harshest environment in the world. But it's a basic reality. If you have power, if you have electricity, so many other things can happen.
Right.
So those two examples, yeah.
We noticed this is the first time in the history of the party and the country that a leader has visited Xizang on its founding anniversary in the capacity of the General Secretary of the CP Central Committee, Chinese president, and also chairman of the Central Military Commission. What does that indicate to the country, regarding how the Chinese leadership values this region?
Well, it's an extremly important region. It's a very large region, and the gateway really to South Asia, to Nepal, Bhutan, then eventually India as well. So it's a very, very important region in that respect. But also what I find extremely important is the constant development, reform, and improvement of the autonomous region policy, the autonomous area policy. And Xizang is one of the outstanding achievements in that respect. And 60 years, it indicates that as long as it's constantly updated and reformed, that it has actually been a very successful approach to give significant autonomy to the area in terms of economic, educational, cultural, social initiatives with very, very strong support from the central government. And it's a marker of the importance of the autonomous areas and that part of the governance structure in China that is indicated by the General Secretary's visit on the 60th anniversary.
Bocheng, President Xi talked about this, basically urging the nation to build a modern socialist new Xizang that is united, prosperous, civilized, harmonious, and beautiful. Of course, he said that, after listening to the work reports from leaders from this regional governments and also party committee, etc. From that kind of emphasis, how do you explain to outside world, what's the Chinese value in terms of development, in terms of this harmony, etc., in terms of governance?
Well, domestically, we are talking about the integrated sovereignty where all regions will have to be synchronized in the modernization drive of Chinese socialism. So Xizang cannot be really left behind. And so President Xi attaches such a great importance to the development of such an autonomous and unique region, does not only show that he cares about economic growth and in the meanwhile integrated with environmental quality control, but also I think he's speaking to the world that because Xizang's unique position is that it stands the third pole of glacier, so that has a very large global and regional impact on the climate change issues. So therefore, to be able to integrate the high quality development with Xizang is a sense of responsibility on regional and global basis. And look at the fact that how we address the river issues, because Xizang is really the source for more than a dozen major rivers connecting Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So we address it with our neighborhood in a very peaceful and harmonious way, which is in contrast with many other regions who are fighting and even launching wars with their neighbors. And so next is that how Xizang can be further developed through the structural changes, how they can be shifting more to a diversified growth structure instead of living on the traditional agriculture. So how to develop the modern tourism, how to utilize more of the digital empowerment to further go ahead in this modernization drive. I think that's the very strong message President Xi has been delivering.
Yeah, Roland, of course, I know you have been following the development of Xizang closely. You mentioned about the strong support from the central government. I know also there's kind of like a one-on-one match system, like one of the cities will enjoy the support from a specific, city or province from the eastern part of the country, right, in Xizang. So that kind of direct support logistically, manpower, human resources, and technology, investment, all played a role in this rapid development in Xizang, right?
Well, I remember visiting a middle school and lower and upper middle school. I guess in English we'd call it a high school. And what struck me about this place was that it actually had paired with one or two high schools in Beijing to leverage the experience and, of course, achievements of education, secondary education in a place like Beijing. And they would have a program, for example, of rotating experienced teachers and skilled teachers to this school in Xizang, so that the students could actually gain experience, and also the teachers there would then spend time in Beijing. So it's also, what struck me is that process of pairing, where one area which has developed faster or further is then able to use all of that experience to help another area that is still on the way, like in Xizang. And that also obviously bears fruit in all sorts of areas, whether it's in medicine or whether it's in, well, the other example I want to use is beer brewing. So there's a microbrewery in Lhasa, which is, I think, the highest brewery in the world, which uses the water from the river there, very pure, well, spring water actually, not from the river, spring water, or snow melt water, in order to brew the beer, to produce a special beer. And I was talking with them, it only just started, and I said, you have an extraordinary possibility here of using the new technology for brewing beer, of promoting this beer as the beer from the highest place in the world. So all sorts of examples of those kinds of initiatives and projects.
What about this, potential for further development? Earlier we mentioned about, of course, Tibetan medicine, tourism, and also clean energy, especially hydropower. The largest, hydro power development dam is under construction already, and started the construction there. So can we say the potential remains massive there?
Definitely. I think there are two key words. One is connectivity, because right now there have been highway, there's more airports and direct flights from many other regions to this place. There are fast trains, and so when people get better connected, they have more access to information, either economic or cultural. And the other is mobility, because the mobility is really a two-way traffic. They can really attract more of tourists and investors from any part of the world. And then for them, they can really get jobs and identify business opportunities all around China and the rest of the world. And then that can really give them a better value of their local produce. Either it's their unique milk, their fungus, and also animal skins. And then they identify more opportunities and more technologies to help to develop their local medicine. And for example, I visited one of the Xizang medicine group. They use more of the extractive technologies and fermentation technologies to develop their local medicine, and which is gaining popularity in many parts of the world. Actually, I introduced a sales channel for them in the United States, which is working very successfully in cooperation with the local produce. So I think going ahead, they need also to balance their economic structure, where they can stay with their local farming, but more of modern service will be developed, aided by modern technology and also by better connectivity. And in the meanwhile, the people's capacity will still need to be enhanced so that they can make more informed decisions, either for their cultural heritage or for their economic growth. So it's in a nutshell, I think it's a very fine balance, spearing ahead between the preservation of cultural heritage, the ecological civilization, and versus economic growth.
Well, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Bocheng, for speaking to us. That's the end of the first part of our discussion. Thanks to our guests. Let's take a short break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. To continue our talks on Xizang's development, in this part, I'm glad to be joined by Andy Boreham, columnist and filmmaker from the Shanghai Daily. Welcome, Andy. I know that you just got back from Xizang. You produced a series of videos about your experience in Xizang. Could you please share with us some of your experience?
Yeah, sure. I was really, really lucky to be able to head there to Xizang. It was one of the remaining provincial level areas in China that I hadn't been to. So that was really awesome. As you mentioned, I went to film a short documentary series called 7 Days in Xizang, kind of taking fun of the famous Hollywood movie. So I visited Lhasa, the capital, and also a place called Rikazi, which is a few hours drive away, that has quite a good relationship with Shanghai. There's a lot of cities in Xizang which have relationships with more developed cities in China. So that's our one. But one of my main impressions, it's very high. We took the train over. Actually, a lot of people recommended not flying directly because of the altitude sickness you might run into. So we took the Xizang line, which is the train from Xining all the way to Lhasa, which is the highest railroad in the world, which was pretty awesome. It takes about 22 hours, so you can slowly acclimatize. I think a lot of people, especially foreigners, don't realize how dangerous that high altitude sickness could be if it got serious. So we were fine, which was really good. Despite being really far away, I found the place to be, really developed, clean, bustling place. It's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to going back again.
You mentioned a little bit about that. So I wonder, what's your general sense of the current, economic and social development in the cities, as well as probably in the country? When you meet people, what's your impression of Xizang?
Well, to be honest, I think my preconceived ideas were quite biased based on Western accounts that I've seen and watched over the years. So I probably, when I think about it, I thought it would be very dirty, maybe a bit backwards. But I found actually the situation there is pretty amazing, just like visiting many other places here in China. The economic situation, I think it's hard for me to compare, having only been once, but I have read a lot about Xizang's past, and I know that the economic situation's improved so much, especially since the 1950s, but also just in the last decade, there's been so much improvement, employment, education. I think all aspects are much better. And you can really feel it on the streets, I think. Of course, there's such a huge difference there since liberation, when, for example, the average life expectancy was just 35 years of age back in the 1950s, which was really obviously very low. So now that's more than doubled, I think, to more than 72 years of age today. So I think that alone is a huge indicator of kind of the progress that's been made there in Xizang.
Well, exactly. I mean, I speak of the development, of course, it has a lot to do with the infrastructure construction. One challenge for developing or grow the economy in Xizang is, the lack of infrastructure, or used to be the case. But now it's much better. How is your experience traveling from one place to another?
Oh, it was amazing. We drove from Lhasa to Rikazi. And for me, because it's my first time, I just felt like it's this highway, very, very modern, very convenient. The trip is just really amazing, comfortable. There's stops along the way to get food, look at scenery. And then I was told by our travel guide that that's a new development recently, and that before it was so much harder just in the past few years to make that kind of journey. So I think as China knows, I mean, you look at just, travel infrastructure like high-speed rail and highways really does help a lot with development and with making a place much more better off.
Yeah, there's also a large number of monasteries, temples in Xizang. I know you went to some of them. You talked to monks living, working inside the temple. So what's your impression? Are they, freely engaged with daily activities and work and with people, with visitors?
I think so. Like, it's amazing. When you read Western media and it tells you that, religion is suppressed in Xizang, it becomes laughable once you arrive there and see for yourself. I think the two places I've been to, Lhasa and Rikadze, they're very, very spiritual places. In Lhasa, I visited the Sierra Monastery, which is one of the three greatest in all of Xizang. They have, I think, around about 5,000 student monks who study there. It's kind of like a monk university. And now, if you think with the Western mindset, what a university is, you might think 3 years, 4 years, but they actually study there for a lifetime. That becomes their life. It's kind of like 一辈子都有学习. So, and they also have visitors all the time. And those visitors are often also Buddhist believers or just visitors like me checking it out. So a lot of them are praying and making offerings. And also I have to add, this is another interesting thing I found in Lhasa, near the Jokhang Temple, which is another famous one. It's not just a place for Buddhists, which many people might find surprising. There's also a Muslim quarter in Lhasa that is hugely bustling. There's a mosque there called the Lhasa Great Mosque, and it's just really amazing. They're quite close to each other, seeing these two religions existing peacefully together. So I think overall there's much more outward expression of religion than anywhere I've been in the West, especially my country, New Zealand. So I think, yeah, like I said before, it's a quite laughable accusation from the West. I think those places are extremely spiritual, and people there are just going about their days freely. You can go and see for yourself.
Yeah, we mentioned about this lack of understanding or misunderstanding from the West about Xizang. One part of that, comes from the media coverage of this place. Often they say, oh, there's no teaching of the Tibetan language or cultural genocide, etc. Did you go to any schools talking to the kids? Are they learning their language?
Yes, I did. That was one of the main things I wanted to go and see myself. So one of the main reasons for filming this short documentary, 7 Days in Xizang, was to kind of find out if the Western media claims were true. And one of the main things was, apart from religion, the Tibetan language, how freely it's learned there. So I checked out a few Tibetan language classes in a local high school. It's just one of the hilarious things I find about the cultural genocide claim is they kind of claim that making Tibetan people learn Mandarin, which is China's official language, is some kind of cultural genocide. But what I found out when I went there is, for example, in Tibet, there's not just one Tibetan language. There are 2 or 3 different dialects. So people from different parts of Xizang may not even be able to understand each other. So, there's Lhasa dialect, which is kind of the Biaojun, the standard dialect, and people have to kind of switch to that. But then if Tibetan people are meeting someone from different parts of China, for example, from Xinjiang, they need to use Mandarin. But on top of that, and this is the really funny thing, another of the languages that is mandatory to learn, at least at this school I visited, is English. But you're not going to see people in the Western media saying, why are they forced to learn English? That is cultural genocide. Because they'll turn around and say, well, of course they need to learn English because English is a global language. It helps people communicate. Well, in China, Mandarin is the global language. So that was one of the hilarious things I found out. So I kind of realized we just kind of need to laugh at these accusations and do our best to keep telling the truth. I really feel like the tide is turning.
And why that? Why this constant obsession with there's oppression, there's a cultural genocide, there's no teaching a loss of cultural elements or language. What do you think is the root cause of this kind of narrative bias?
I think actually a lot of it comes from They just don't understand China at all, and they don't want to understand China. It's always through their lens. It's something that they feel they have to do, Western media, because imagine if people in the West, especially today, knew how well China is doing with a different kind of system. That would make people question their own reality. Why aren't we doing as well as China? People say China is a communist, socialist, it's so evil. We are free democracies, free capitalist states, but we're not doing as well as them. The more and more people learn about the successes of a country like China, they're really going to start to question their own system. So I think it's absolutely necessary. But I feel like it's getting better, and I feel like the veil, I guess, of Western media is slowly being removed, and China is becoming, especially this year, way more cool in the eyes of a lot of people overseas. You'll remember, obviously, the Red Note situation, where a lot of TikTok refugees came and used Red Note, and then they could start speaking directly with Chinese people. And that was a real awakening for especially a lot of Americans. And there's been a lot of other wins this year, cultural, especially soft cultural wins, like, Huawei, an amazing product. Recently, Labubu, that toy that I don't understand.
Right.
Seek Larkin coffee, and especially China standing up to Trump's tariffs. I think, China's just becoming cooler and cooler. So I think actually lately, I have a feeling that Western media is starting to tone it down a little bit, because they can't keep getting away with the lies they've been pushing since before. And especially with China's free visa policy, more and more people can visit this place with their own eyes. So I really do feel like things are slowly changing for the better, and I'm crossing my fingers.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for speaking to us with your own experience. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.